Hello, and welcome to your Investigative Interviewing Personal Skills Development Package. My name is Andy Farrell. I'm the author of this course, and it's my pleasure to be your narrator throughout. Each slide has its own commentary, which will start automatically when the slide is selected, and you can move between slides in your own time simply by clicking with the mouse or pressing the Enter key, whichever you prefer. Because it's a normal PowerPoint presentation, you can pause whenever you wish and then pick it up again when convenient. And you don't have to go back to the beginning, just carry on from where you left off. The accompanying workbook contains a range of personal exercises for you to try, and also some further notes on elements such as mind mapping and witness statements, which are difficult to explore fully just using PowerPoint. One final point before we start. This package is based on an ebook of the same name, so if you enjoy the course, you'll no doubt enjoy the book. Please click on this slide to start your journey, and enjoy. This skills development package is designed to give an insight into more than just how to conduct an interview. It actually goes a lot further to give managers such as yourself, regardless of your actual job role, a basic understanding of the overall investigative process. By understanding how investigations work in practice, you'll be far better equipped to undertake an internal investigation into, say, a serious works accident or an allegation of gross misconduct, and so on. You'll know not only what to do, but, and this is just as important, you'll know what not to do. By the end of this course, you should be able to, firstly, understand the differences between management and investigative interviews, because they are very different. Understand some of the fundamental psychological principles underpinning the investigation process and investigation interviewing. Understand some of the practicalities involved in conducting an investigation and in conducting an investigative interview. And finally, you should understand in principle how to analyse and use data obtained during the investigation. In a normal management interview, the manager is clearly in charge. There'll be a two-way flow of conversation with the person he's interviewing, and the manager should, if he's doing his job, should listen to what the person says and note down whatever's relevant. But the manager never loses control of the interview. He sets the structure, he determines where it's going to go and what the purpose is going to be. An interrogation is a completely different thing from interview. An interrogation is a one-way flow from the interrogator to the subject, because the interrogator is not interested in what the subject may have to say, what their point of view is, what their defence is. All they want to hear is a confession that suits their agenda. So, from an investigative point of view, when you're trying to find the truth, it's a completely pointless exercise. Interrogation is not just one way, it can actually get more sinister. It can involve threats and or actual violence. Anything to get the subject to say what the interrogator wants them to say. The conventional wisdom is that people who are lying will be unable to look you in the eye. But that's not necessarily true. A University of Michigan study was carried out, and they discovered that 70% of liars did exactly that. They looked you in the eye while they were lying through their teeth. So that seems fairly clear-cut, 70%. However, a UCLA study, another university, looked at the same thing and they got the opposite result. So whether someone makes eye contact or not cannot be taken as a reliable guide to honesty. So we're going back to the original point, that when it comes to body language, it can be powerful, but you've got to look at clusters of things changing. You can't take things for granted. Let's also be aware of the impact of cultural factors. I said that the conventional wisdom is that people will not look you in the eye. Maybe I should have said conventional Western wisdom. Because in some cultures, people will not look you in the eye because to do so is regarded as being very disrespectful. So they look down to the ground. So you've got a situation there, potentially, where somebody looks to the ground to be respectful and honest, and they're immediately classified as lying. The peace interview technique was developed in the 1990s. It's based on the conversation management technique we looked at earlier, and it gets its name from the 5 stages involved: planning and preparation, engage and explain, account, clarification and challenge, closure, evaluation. We'll now go on to look at each of these steps in more detail. One of the problems with asking questions, and it's something that novice investigators don't always grasp, is the point that all questions are not the same. There are a number of different types of questions. They've all got their different uses. And so, as we'll see, choosing the correct type, asking it in the right way, can significantly affect the eventual outcome of the whole interview. A very powerful technique which can be used for investigative interviewing is probably the simplest. It's simply to say nothing. Now, people don't like silences. So if you respond to an answer with a polite, yes, I see, or something similar, and then you say nothing further, you just look at them politely, but keep your own counsel, the odds are they will continue talking. And of course, by doing that, they're providing additional detail, which may or may not be false. They're just trying to fill in the awkward silence. And of course, the more they talk, the more information they give you, the more you've got to work on. When you're writing a statement for somebody, remember you're doing so to their dictation. So use their words and resist the urge to tidy up their grammar. Of course, if they're using phrases like, you know what I mean, then you don't have to include those, but ensure the key information is in there as they say it. If the statement is at all lengthy, then it's helpful to read it back to them occasionally just to make certain that you're actually on track, and also, of course, it gives them confidence that you're doing it properly and accurately. A good practice to follow is to always show surnames in block capitals. The reason for this practice is that it makes it easier should a lawyer or somebody else be reading through the statement quickly, trying to find a relevant reference. They can easily find the people they want. And if they're going through a multi-page statement, it does speed the process up tremendously. Bearing in mind this factor that the statement can be read by somebody who's not connected with the incident or not connected with the company, you've got to be certain you've got sufficient detail in that statement to paint a comprehensive word picture of events so they understand what happened. This skills development pack, and indeed the book upon which it's based, focus primarily on investigative interviewing. However, it was felt that that's really not enough. For completeness, let's look at what you do with the evidence that you gather during the interviews and indeed your other enquiries. So we'll look at some evidence analysis techniques. But before we look at evidence analysis, it's best to think about how good is that evidence. Is there a way of grading it so you can give it the appropriate level of importance? You'll almost certainly need to write a final report once the investigation is complete, And of course, you may also need to write interim reports as the investigation proceeds if it's a complicated inquiry. Regardless of whether it's the final report or an interim report, the comments we're going to make now are equally valid. It's important to remember that the report may be seen not just internally within the company, but may be used as evidence in legal proceedings, whether that be an industrial tribunal, a criminal prosecution, or whatever. With that in mind, the content of the report should be robust enough to withstand intense legal scrutiny if required.